And greetings to everybody in PTUK land, hosts and community alike. This is James Graves Brown coming live in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. And I've got a special guest today here to talk to us about aviation and RC flying. Welcome, Scott DeRigny.
Hey James, how you doing?
Did I say it right?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Yeah, then everything's good. All right, Scott. So I want to start with a little introductory section here. Let's find out a little bit about you. How did you get started in aviation?
Well, I got started in aviation thanks to my dad. My dad worked at McDonnell Douglas and then Boeing after that merger in St. Louis, which is where I grew up, working on fighter jets. So in my house growing up, there was a bunch of posters of different fighters and airplanes and models and everything. And on top of that, we would go flying in general aviation airplanes. My dad taught me how to fly. We'd also fly in a small helicopter. He got his helicopter rating for fun as well as his flight instructor. So that was my big influence for learning how to fly and being involved in aviation.
That's too cool. And just for the community to know, this is our round two. I kind of screwed up our first interview this morning, so I know some stuff that you guys don't know, but we'll find out, and that's why I got a little smirk when he said about the small helicopter. Something I didn't ask you earlier, and I'm truly curious, what did your dad do on the jets that he worked on?
His title was flight inspector. He's a mechanic, is what my dad does. So
Okay.
he's an airframe power plant
Awesome.
mechanic. But his role was quality assurance. So one of the mechanics would put a part together, say the ejection seat, and he would decide whether it was airworthy or not.
Oh, awesome. That's too
So
cool.
that was his role. Yeah.
That's awesome. How long you been flying for?
I got my private pilot in 2006. So that's about 17 years now. Of course, I've got several hours of stick time prior to all that since I was a little kid. But it was called 17 years.
Awesome. And how many of those professionally?
Coming up on 12 now. I started in 2011.
Perfect. Okay, what's your current position?
I'm a Boeing 737 first officer at one of the three major U.S. airlines.
Okay, and just for the community's sake, well, most of you will know, but for my sake, Scott's in Dallas based, so we're going to call his airline Acme Silver.
Okay.
Okay, can you tell me about your career path from start to present?
Sure. So my first flying job I got when I was 19 years old, and that was a banner tow pilot. I worked in Myrtle Beach, and that was just one summer between freshman and sophomore year at college. A lot of fun, kind of dangerous, but still a lot of fun.
So cool, though.
Yeah. After that, I got my CFI, my Certified Flight Instructor certificate, and I instructed for my university at the University of Central Missouri, and did that for about 2 years or so until I graduated. And then I graduated and went to the regional airlines, and from there I became ATR 72 first officer, and I flew that airplane for not quite a year, about 254 hours worth. Then after that, I switched to the Embraer 145, and I flew that for several years. I was first officer for about 6.5 years, and then I upgraded to captain.
Oh, cool.
And shortly after that, I became a check airman, or a check pilot, they call them nowadays. And I think I flew that airplane for about 3,200 hours or so.
Cool.
And until I got my job with the major airline, and now I'm a Boeing 737 first officer, and I've flown that airplane for about 1,550 hours or so now.
Very cool.
So that's how I got where I'm at.
Awesome. Without being too obvious, what regional did you fly for?
It's one of the wholly owned regionals, which there's only a couple of those to pick from.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
Associated with my major airline. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Awesome. So
Yeah.
it wasn't too far of a leap away from home.
Exactly.
Good, good. All right. Which version of the 737 have you flown and do you currently fly?
Well, my airline's got two. They've got the 800 NG, and they also have the Max 8, and that's we only have 8-800s or Max 8s.
Awesome. And which one's your
Both
favorite
the
to fly?
same.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're both the same seating capacity, so
Oh,
it
okay.
makes it easy to plan for the airline, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, my favorite one,
Yeah.
I'd say the Max, just because it's got that new airplane feel, smell, control feel, everything. It's a really nice ride. It's got the same screens as the 787. It's pretty nice.
Oh, earlier in our interview, I thought you said it's the same screens as the earlier 737s, and I was kind of thrown off by that.
No, no, no. It's the
787.
787.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense now. That's pretty cool. Um,
yeah.
on that note, did when they recertified the aircraft, did you have any nervousness about its functionality, or were you pretty confident that they had corrected it
I,
properly?
yeah, I was pretty confident in the fix that they had for it. They, of course, had a differences school for us where we came in. We had a CBT, computer-based training about the fix and
Okay.
what the MCAS was, for example, and how to recognize when it fires. And also, we had a simulator session uh, covering all those same topics. So we got very specific training on all that, and it made me feel very comfortable when I finally got to fly the airplane.
Good. That's perfect. Um, my opinion, and it may not be the popular opinion, but I feel like because during the time of those crashes, we had several airlines flying that jet in the U.S. and not really too many issues or close calls or anything. And I feel like, I may be wrong here, but I kind of feel like it's like the U.S. has higher training standards or more training maybe, and that led to our pilots being more capable in uh, stressful situations, maybe higher decision making skills. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, of course, you're going to ask my opinion on that. We're all going to say, "Oh, of course we're better," but I don't. I'm not informed enough on the topic to really comment.
That's fair.
On that.
You know,
So
and I'm
I don't want to. I don't want to disparage my fellow pilots in other countries.
That's fair. And I feel like maybe I'm probably wrong on that. I hope that I'm probably wrong on that. I'm confident getting on any commercial airliner, so I better be wrong on that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Are you type rated on other aircraft?
Yep. ATR 72 when I was new hire at the regional, then the Embraer 145. And in the ATR training course, we got the ATR 42 type rating as well.
Mm, cool.
So two of those Embraer 145 plus the Boeing 737. So total of four for now.
Awesome. For now, with plans for the
Yeah,
future for more?
of course. Yeah.
Good man. Good man. Um, if you could fly any jet, what would you choose?
Yeah. Anything. I'd probably pick an F-18. That's my favorite airplane of all time. And if we're talking airliners, I'd really like to fly the 787. That would be pretty cool.
Now, do you find any difference in the newer versions of 787 from the older ones? I've heard that a lot of pilots don't like the older 787s versus the 900.
I haven't really talked to many 787 pilots about the difference between the Dash 8 and the Dash 9, so I couldn't say.
Okay, fair enough. Why did you choose your current airline?
Well, at the time when I was picking regional airlines, this was 2011, so it's right after that 2008 recession. So not all the regionals were hiring. Some of them required higher minimums than what I currently had. So I had a friend go to this airline that I ended up choosing, and he kind of told me about it. And I liked the idea that it was a wholly owned regional. Turned out well for me, and uh, I was afforded the flow through, so that was a direct career path to the major airline.
Beautiful.
So it really worked out well for me.
Good. And I assume though you did take a hit on your seniority, your rank.
Yeah. I got up to one of the top percentage pilots at my regional, and then when you switch airlines, you start over from the very bottom. And in my case, it was a 15,000 pilot long list that I was at the bottom of.
That is
So,
such a long list.
yes,
And you did say something in our previous discussion about the shortage of pilots now, so
yes,
you're moving up, unfortunately.
I'm moving up quite a bit, quite quickly, thanks to the pilot shortage, because a lot of pilots are retiring. I think we have about 100 pilots a month retiring,
That is
which is an
so
insane
nuts.
number.
It
It's
is.
creating lots of training, creating lots of movement, seniority wise. So that's generally good for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where do you generally fly, and what's your schedule look like?
My schedule typically looks like a 3 on, 2 off, 3 on, 3 off. That's what I have this month, and hoping for next month too.
Okay.
Um, More typical, I had 4 day trips where I do 4 days on, 3 days off. Uh, so that's kind of the cadence that we typically do. In terms of destinations, it just depends on the trip. Some trips are purely domestic trips. My status is also international, meaning we'll go down south all the way down to Central America. We'll go to northern South America. Occasionally, we'll go to the Caribbean if we're lucky. Lots of Mexico, Canada, uh, and yeah, that's sometimes it's mixed. Sometimes you'll do south of the border for 3 days, and then you'll have to pack your coat because on the last day you'll be up north somewhere where it's
Oh
really cold.
man. So I have two additional questions off of that one that I didn't ask you earlier, but I'm really curious. Have you ever flown into the Princess Jean Airport? God, I can't remember what island it's on,
St.
but
Martin,
St. Martin. Did you have you ever flown into that?
yes, and we jet blasted the beachgoers just
Oh,
like
that's so
you're
cool.
supposed to.
That I
Yeah,
want to do
it
it
was.
so bad. I want to go there.
Yeah, it was
Um,
a lot of fun.
that's awesome. And my second question off of that was in South America. I know there's a lot of dangerous airports that require special training to fly into. Do you fly any of those?
Yep. My company has special qualifications called Latin terrain, and we get special training from a Czech pilot or Czech airman uh, just to go to these places. There's a handful of them. One of the more dangerous ones we go to is actually in Central America, Guatemala City, and that's due to the terrain around the runway. Lots of different factors to consider when you go to these dangerous terrain airports. Uh, but they sure are beautiful to fly into,
Oh, I bet.
and it makes it for a more exciting time when you're not worried about the all the threats that could reach up and get you.
That's that's cool, man. That's awesome. All right, so let's get into your hobby, the RC aircraft, the meat and potatoes of why we're here.
All
Um,
right.
Tell me what got you into RC flying.
Well, similar story to full scale. It was thanks to my dad. It was one activity that we used to do together when I was a younger. So I think I was about 11 years old when we got into it, and we had my dad had one of his retired buddies from McDonnell Douglas teach us how to do it. And this was in like the late 90s, early 2000s when electric airplanes were just starting to come around. So we had an electric trainer that was, uh, well loved.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And how long have you been flying those for?
Since then, so I was 11 then, so 34 now, so 20 plus years with a little break in between. Pretty typical story, actually. If you ever listen to any other RC related podcasts, when they interview somebody, they'll tell the same story. You go to college, you take a break, you start your family, start your career. No time to really participate in the hobby. But once my life settled down, I was able to get back into it about 6 years ago.
Okay, well, you're a seasoned vet, it sounds like. How many do you own and what types are they?
I currently I had 9 fixed wing airplanes. Now I have 8. Unfortunately, this past Tuesday, I crashed my favorite airplane. Uh, that's another story. So I've got 3 drones, which are racing drones. That's the other part of the hobby I like to participate in. And of course, one RC car.
What kind of car?
It's just a Horizon hobby. I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's called a Centon. Just like a little sand buggy,
Oh, cool.
pretty fun. Yeah. It can go 50 miles an hour out of the box, so it's pretty cool.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Is that a fuel driven or is that a electric?
Electric. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's pretty awesome for an electric car.
No kidding. Yeah.
What's your favorite aircraft to fly that you own?
Well, it was the F-18 that I crashed on
Oh man.
Tuesday. Uh, it was an electric airplane that I had converted to turbine power. And I was sad to see it go, but that just provides me the opportunity to get a new airplane.
There
So
you go.
not complaining about that. So my current favorite now, I would have to say, is my 7th scale F-16 turbine powered. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Are those your only two turbine powered?
Correct. Yeah, I have
Okay.
2 turbines, and the rest are all electric.
Awesome. Aside from the obvious size and ATC and co-pilots and etc., what is the similarities and differences between RC jet flying and full-scale jet flying?
So similarities, you've got physics, lift, weight, thrust, and drag, center of gravity. All those considerations are the same, no matter your scale. So once you understand that, you're good for full scale or RC.
Okay.
Also, safety culture is very important to full scale as well as RC flying, because airplanes, no matter their size, will hurt you if you let them. So you need to take care with that.
Makes
The
sense.
other thing I would say is decision making. That's kind of a similar idea and method that we use, or that I would use at least. And of course, fun. They're both fun. So that's similarities for you. Differences: the cost, the accessibility, and less regulations to comply with RC, which increases the amount of fun I would say.
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, and RCs are obviously cheaper and more accessible for people. So
Yeah.
you can't afford to fly full scale. You can afford to fly RC.
Yeah, you just don't get the same view. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's ways around that, of course. You could do FPV flying.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of regulation, is there any kind of licensing or certificate you need to be flying those?
I wouldn't call it a license or certificate, but in order to go fly at the club places that I go to, you need to have that most of them require to have an AMA membership to the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and that gives you access to the model airplane community. It gives you an insurance policy, and so it's kind of a nice thing to have. Lots of information to access. The other thing you need to do, which is actually sponsored by the AMA, is the trust test. And I can't tell you what that stands for, but it's a relatively new thing. It's just a written test to check your safety knowledge. Remember, I mentioned safety culture is kind of important.
Yeah.
So it's not a test you need to study weeks and weeks and weeks for. So you go and take it. It's open book, and you just learn safety, and that's the point of that. The only I don't know how you would even classify it. It's called a turbine waiver. So, in order to fly turbine airplanes, you need to have a turbine waiver, which is sponsored by the AMA, and it's kind of a community learning thing. So you find an experienced turbine pilot that can observe you fly your airplane, check your setup, check your safety knowledge, and things like that, and fill in any gaps in knowledge that you might have. And you have to do that with 2 different people before you earn your turbine waiver.
Okay.
So that's kind of how the community polices itself for safety.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any special designated airspace that you guys fly in, or can you just take your plane out wherever you feel like it and put her up in the air?
Well, it's become more complicated recently due to federal regulations, the remote ID rule that's come into effect. So you can go fly as long as you have a remote broadcast module. To my understanding, don't check me on this, but you need to have a remote ID broadcast module to fly just anywhere, unless you go to a pre-designated spot called a FRIA, which all these clubs that I belong to and with throughout the country are becoming FRIAs, which is a zone where you can fly a model or a drone, as they call them. They're all drones
Okay.
uh, to to uh, to fly without the broadcast module. So that I just mitigate that by going to the club field because, well, number one, there's not that many people around. There's not any property to damage or people to hurt. So it's kind of you know a safety thing for me too. But you could go to the park and fly as long as you comply with those federal rules.
That's awesome. Is there any altitudes that you're not to exceed?
Yes. So the safety program of the AMA says don't go higher than 400 feet, and that's typically the rule at every club I've ever been to. I know that there's other clubs that have exceptions or exemptions to go higher. Those are like soaring clubs and stuff where they would want more altitude than 400 feet. But
Yeah.
I've never been to one of those. Most places I've been to is 400 feet.
And while you're flying, how do you know what altitude you're at and how do you maintain that altitude?
Eyeballs, for the most part. Um, so that's you just judge it by your eyes, but there's also telemetry that you can install on your airplane, and you'll tell your transmitter, your controller, what altitude you're at. On my glider, I have that. It tells you my vertical speed and altitude, but on a glider, it's nice and slow. I have time to look down at the transmitter and see, oh, this is my altitude. But with the jets, they're way too fast and a handful. So even if I had that telemetry, I wouldn't be able to look at it.
Interesting. And on the note of fast, what's your fastest one? And what do you approximate its top speed is?
Oh, I haven't clocked my airplane, but it's going to be my turbine powered F-16, and it probably could hit 200 knots if I really tried.
That's nuts.
I'll have to
Um,
let you know after I get a GPS in it or something.
yeah, buddy. I definitely want to know. How does the weather, like humidity and extreme heat or extreme cold, affect your flight, if at all?
Weather, the biggest threat to us doing remote control airplanes would be the wind. So that's the most common thing that RC pilots are concerned with. Um, so that's mostly what we look at. But extreme cold that can affect the performance of electric airplanes because the lithium batteries, if they get really cold, they don't perform as well. So that could be a factor as well. And sometimes the sun, depending on where the sun is and where you're flying and things like that. But it's not as big of a factor as the wind.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the difficulty of controlling them, and how long did it take you to perfect that?
Well, I'm still working on perfection, just like every other pilot out there. But uh, it just depends on the plane. So you'd start out on a trainer, beginner, and you have intermediate airplanes, you have advanced turbines. Airplanes are usually considered intermediate to advanced airplanes, and it just takes practice. Uh, they have simulators now that are very realistic, and they help a lot to learn how to do it. So
Simulators
you just
for
work your way up.
for RCs, simulators.
They do. They
Wow.
indeed do have a RC simulator, real flight. They're up to real flight 9.5, I think.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Have you ever crashed or destroyed a plane? Obviously, you said earlier that you did. Tell me about that.
Yes, that's part of the hobby. You build it, you fly it, you crash it, and you repeat. That's just the way it is. So, yes, I have crashed airplanes, and I crashed my beloved F-18 the other day. Luckily, it wasn't a horrible crash, so I didn't lose my power system or my electronics, just the airframe.
Okay, so you could just get a new airframe and you'd be good to go.
Yeah,
Good. Glad to hear it. Sorry for your loss anyway.
Oh, thank you.
So that being said, are they fairly durable in crashes, or is like one runway excursion going to kill it?
Well, it depends on the plane, of course, and it depends on your mistake. My F-16 only likes the hard surface. Ask me how I know. Um, so it doesn't like the grass. It doesn't like to overrun the runway. Doesn't matter how smooth it is. Um, Other airplanes don't care. They take off and land from the grass, hard surface or not. Uh, it of course, airplanes and trees don't get along.
Naturally.
Ask me how I know. Uh, so
That
yeah,
makes
it all
sense.
depends on your mistake, but in yeah, they can be fairly durable, surprisingly.
Okay, good to know. Because, if I ever get around to flying one, I'm going to need the most durable one they have.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
What's the cost of owning one and flying one, like both annually and per flight?
Well, trainer airplanes you can get started for surprisingly cheap nowadays. You could probably get everything you need for $300 or so with a trainer. Then you get to intermediate airplanes, the things that I like electric jets. They're called EDFs, electric ducted fan.
Okay.
Um, they run anywhere from $400 to $600, generally in that range. And then once you get to turbines, you start talking to thousands of dollars. So estimating cost of my F-16 all up with the engine, airframe, electronics, all that stuff, it's probably about $4,000 flying around. And that's a cheaper turbine. There's definitely more expensive ones out there.
Oh my gosh, that's nuts. It's awesome though. It's a cool hobby. So now, what's the cost per flight? Is there like I mean, assuming you go out and you dump a whole tank of Jet A in there, what are you looking at cost wise?
Um, my F-16, it's got a 1.8 liter tank.
Okay.
So if I was to guess, a gallon of jet fuel is about $6 or so a gallon right
Oh, okay,
now.
that's not so bad.
So it's probably like $2 or $3 in fuel per flight.
Cool. So any of us can go out there and do this. Let's go.
Sure, yeah. As long as you don't crash, your flights are cheap.
Well, okay, now you're talking a whole nother game there. Um,
Right.
is there many shops around that sell and modify these RC planes?
They're becoming a rare breed, the actual in-person shops. And I'll admit to my fault of not going to my local hobby shops. I would encourage anyone who gets into it to go and support, because that's where you're going to find your repair help, your expertise, knowledge of how to fix or build airplanes. Um, your online shops don't give you that typically, and so that's kind of the trend in the hobby right now. The brick and mortar stores are going away, and it's a sad resource to see go.
Yeah, that kind of just puts it all on your shoulders. Order your parts and figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's good learning, but also, yeah, I remember as a kid going to hobby shops, and that was always a fun thing to do. It always gave you something to look forward to. So
Of course, yeah.
sad to see them go. Um,
Yeah.
Tell me about the RC owners community. Like, do you guys have a big online presence, or is it all a bunch of cities, or is it more catered to individuals?
Yeah, the community's great. Everybody's there for fun. So everybody's generally happy. They're willing to help each other. Um, you'll find all kinds doing remote control airplanes and drone racing for that matter. And it's a really part of the fun, honestly, is the community.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I have a Scion XB. I don't know if you know what that is. It's one of the real square
Yeah.
cars. Well, I have met some of the coolest people online Facebook groups for XBs, and just there it's this whole interesting world that exists mostly on Facebook, but it's all throughout the country. It's really cool to see.
It's always a pleasure to get around like-minded people that like the same thing as you and
Well, yeah, and
participate. Yeah.
I've found a lot of interesting, cool people in these podcasts that I listen to with the aviation community. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful for it. Do they hold air show style events for the RC planes, like mini air shows and whatnot?
Yes, they do. And those are always a lot of fun. typically it just depends on the club and the event, but it can range from a fun fly, as they're called, where anybody could come out and fly. Typically, they have a theme. You know, the ones I like to participate in have to do with jets, of course, but they have warbird themes. They have float flies. They have just typical fun fly. Anything goes. So they have the fun flies, but they also have competitions as well, and invitational competitions where you have to be invited.
And those
So
competitions, do they give out? Are they for money or for bragging rights or trophies? How does that work?
all of the above, I think. I've never
Okay,
participated in one competition, but
fair
yeah,
enough.
I think they compete for real prizes.
And do you guys get big crowds coming out to these events, like spectators?
It depends on the event. The the club I belong to held like a 60th anniversary fly-in air show, so they invited the community, and lots of people showed up. Hundreds of people showed up
That's
to
too
watch
cool.
the RC air show.
Yeah.
And we've had other events where it's really just for the club and any random spectators. Uh, so it ranges.
So okay, so are the clubs and the events open to all experience levels?
Of course, yeah, and that the clubs are sponsored by the AMA, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and they're a great resource for anybody who's new. They have both clubs I belong to have a training night. So if you want
Oh
to learn how
wow.
to fly RC, you arrange with the instructor to go out there once a week or more if you want, and fly a trainer airplane with an
Well,
instructor at your side.
and I assume that being the community is so open that you can find peers that would gladly teach you how to fly.
Yep, each
Assuming
club
you're
has
not.
designated instructors, and uh, I've taken one person under my wing, but he was already a airline pilot, so wasn't terribly difficult to instruct him.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yep. Well, I would assume that if I walked up to somebody with my own jet, of course they'd be like, "Yeah, I'll teach you."
sure, yeah.
um, now, do you get spectators when you're doing your own private flying? Like, say you take your jet out to the club just for some practice or something. Do you get people driving by and stopping to take a look at what you're doing, or?
Yeah, occasionally. The the one club I fly the jets at is pretty out in the country. It's not really close to anything, so there's not so many spectators at that club. The other one that I attend is next to a bunch of soccer fields, so you'll get people all the time
Oh,
coming
cool.
to watch and that are interested. And when I'm drone racing, it's in a soccer field uh, as well, so we'll get a lot of spectators coming out to see what's going on.
You're supposed to be there to watch little Billy's soccer game, and everybody's got their eyes turned
Yeah,
around watching the drones.
yeah. The drones are cool. They got LEDs on them, and they make a lot of noise. And
Yeah, I've watched the
we got
videos,
the
and
loudspeakers with the PA, people announcing and stuff. So
that is nuts. Yeah, I don't comprehend how people have the skills to fly those things as fast as they do in the videos that I've seen online anyway.
yeah, me neither.
Okay, so let's get into story time. I want to hear a good story about your past with
Ah,
aviation.
story. Okay. Well, how about an RC story?
Please do.
Um, yeah. So when I was a kid, my dad and I would go to an abandoned airport in St. Louis area, and we'd fly our RC plane. And it was just before Christmas one year. I was a young teenager, and we are flying our airplane around, or I was flying the airplane around, and it was wintertime weather. It was pretty windy and kind of dreary out, and the the wind was pretty strong aloft. So I'm flying around, and this is my old electric airplane that had NiCad batteries in it. And one of the characteristics of NiCads is the power would fade over the flight, so you wouldn't have full power. Unlike the lipo batteries today, where you get full power more or less until the end of the battery's life. So I'm flying along, and it's time to land. Well, I'm trying to get the airplane back to the runway, but the wind is so strong, I don't have enough power. So I'm full throttle into the wind, and the airplane's still going away from me. And it got so far away that it was just a little pink and yellow dot on the horizon, and I eventually it hit the ground.
Oh
So my dad and
man.
I go out and try and find it. And we're in all these farm fields and looking all over the place and not having any luck. So this is the day before Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, my dad goes out first thing in the morning trying to find it, can't find it.
No.
So pretty disappointing, you know. So we didn't give up that easy though. Day after Christmas, my dad puts his name on the schedule to rent the helicopter that he was checked out in. And we went and flew an R-22 around these fields and did a search and rescue
That's
mission for our
awesome.
RC plane. So, so we found it, and but the helicopter's so small we couldn't bring the airplane inside. So what we had to do was just remember where it was, and we spotted it, and okay, remember it's next to that speed limit sign about 100 yards out to the north. Okay, and so we landed the helicopter, drove back over there, and found it.
That's such a good story. How long do you still have that plane?
No, it's long gone.
Ah, that's unfortunate. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, well, Scott, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to do this not only once but twice. So this was my originally this morning was my first ever interview and my first ever try at podcasting, and so now is my second, and I'm very grateful to have you as my first guest. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. A lot of
Of
fun.
course, of course. Let's give him a round of applause. All right, Scott. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, James.
Bye bye.
Bye.